What does it take to be trusted with a $13 billion warship? 5,000 people live and work on a U.S. aircraft carrier. They operate 75 aircraft and can strike targets 1,000 miles away. A single carrier group carries more firepower than most countries' entire militaries. The whole point of the ship is power projection, the ability to park American air power anywhere in the world without asking anyone's permission. Someone has to be in charge of all that. And here's something most people don't know. To even be considered for the job, you have to be a pilot. Not a ship driver, a pilot. Federal law requires it. The commanding officer on an aircraft carrier must have flown off carrier decks themselves. So how does someone go from flight school at 22 to commanding 5,000 people at 50? How long does it take? What does that career actually look like? The pay, the promotions, the years at sea, and the years back home with family. And then there's the enlisted path. Sailors who start at 18 with a high school diploma work their way up through the ranks and can eventually become the most senior enlisted leader on the ship, advising the captain and representing the entire crew. These two careers run side by side on the same ship, but they start in completely different places and follow completely different ladders. This video breaks down both of them, every rank, what they earn, what they're responsible for, and how many people make it to each level versus how many wash out along the way. We're starting on day one. Day one, 2 arrivals. The Navy has 2 career tracks that run parallel to each other. Enlisted sailors and officers work together, depend on each other, but they enter the service differently and climb separate ladders. Picture 2 people reporting aboard a carrier in the same week. One is 18 years old, fresh out of high school. The other is 22 with a college degree. The 18-year-old is an E1, a Seaman Recruit, the first rung of the enlisted ladder. Their base pay is about $29,000 a year. But that's not the whole picture, because the military doesn't just pay you a salary. You also receive allowances. Allowances cover housing and food. If you live on the ship, you get free meals and a rack to sleep in, so you pocket most of your base pay. If you have a family and live off base, you receive a housing allowance based on your location. San Diego pays more than Jacksonville because rent costs more. These allowances are tax-free, which makes them worth more than they appear. For an E1 living on the ship, total compensation is around $35,000 a year. For one with a family living off base in an expensive area, it could reach $40,000 or more. Their first months on the carrier are about learning. They're figuring out how the ship works, how their specific job fits into the larger mission, and how to function in a floating city that never stops moving. They'll start with supervised tasks, learning procedures, watching experienced sailors, building the foundation for everything that comes next. Every senior enlisted leader on this ship, every chief and master chief, started exactly where this 18-year-old is standing right now. The 22-year-old is an 01, an ensign, the first rung of the officer ladder. Their base pay is around $50,000 a year, and with allowances, total compensation lands somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000 depending on their situation. But the gap isn't really about money. It's about what happens on day one. The ensign gets assigned as a division officer almost immediately. That means 10 to 30 enlisted sailors now report to them. They've never been to sea, never supervised anyone in a professional setting. But they have a college degree and a commission from the Navy, so they're expected to lead. The smart ones figure out quickly that the petty officers working for them know the job far better than they do. The best ensigns ask questions, listen carefully, and learn from the people they technically outrank. The ones who show up thinking their degree makes them experts don't last long, or they struggle until they figure it out. When the Seaman Recruit passes the ensign in a passageway, they salute. Rank structures everything in the military. But both of them are at the bottom of their respective ladders, and both paths take about 20 to 25 years to reach the top, if they make every cut along the way. Year 1. Learning the ship. The first couple of years for an enlisted sailor are about learning a specialty. The Navy calls your job a rate. It's like a career field. There are dozens of rates on a carrier, from electricians and mechanics to radar technicians, aircraft handlers, and cooks. Your rate determines what department you work in, what skills you develop, and what your career trajectory looks like. An E2 Seaman apprentice earns around $32,000 a year. An E3 Seaman makes about $36,000. These early promotions come fairly quickly if you show up, do your job, and stay out of trouble. The Navy needs people to advance into the more skilled positions, so the first couple of rungs move fast. What changes is responsibility. An E3 aviation bosun's mate working on the flight deck might be responsible for the chains that hold aircraft in place. If those chains aren't secured properly, a $40 million jet could roll across the deck or over the side. An E3 machinist's mate down in engineering might monitor pressure gauges in the steam plant. Miss a warning sign, and equipment fails, or worse. The work matters, and the sailors doing it are trusted with real equipment, even though they're still relatively new. Meanwhile, the Ensign has been promoted to O2, Lieutenant Junior grade. Their pay is now around $60,000 base, maybe $75,000 total with allowances. They're still managing their division while learning the ship's systems. Everything from navigation to damage control to how the air wing operates. Here's the thing junior officers figure out during this period. Their job is not to be the expert. Their job is to lead the experts. A 23-year-old officer might be in charge of a maintenance shop, but the E6 Petty Officer First Class, who's been turning wrenches for a decade, is the one who actually knows how everything works. The officer's role is to get resources, remove obstacles, handle the paperwork and bureaucracy, and make sure their people can do the job. It's a different kind of work than what the enlisted sailors do, but both are essential. The Navy has a saying that gets repeated to every junior officer. Listen to your chiefs. We'll get to who the chiefs are shortly, but that advice, listen to the experienced enlisted leaders, is something that separates the officers who succeed from the ones who don't. The flight deck rainbow. If you've ever watched footage of carrier flight operations, you've noticed that everyone on the flight deck wears a colored jersey. It's not random. The colors tell you exactly what that person's job is. And on the most dangerous workplace in the world, everyone needs to know who does what at a glance. Blue shirts are the handlers. They're typically the newer sailors, E1 through E4, and they move aircraft around the deck, pushing planes into position, attaching the chains that hold jets in place, operating the elevators that bring aircraft up from the hangar bay. It's physical, demanding work, and they answer to the yellow shirts. Yellow shirts are directors, the traffic controllers of the flight deck. Using hand signals, they guide pilots and direct the movement of every aircraft. A wrong signal at the wrong moment could put someone in front of a jet intake or behind an engine exhaust. Yellow shirts are senior enlisted sailors, E5 and above, or officers. They've earned the right to direct $40 million aircraft because they've proven they can be trusted with that responsibility. Green shirts work on the catapults and arresting gear, the systems that launch and recover aircraft. They're also the hook runners who verify the tail hook is clear after each landing. This is E4 through E6 territory, and it's dangerous work. The catapult operates under enormous pressure, and the arresting cables can snap under the strain of stopping a jet. Green shirts work inches from equipment that can kill. Red shirts handle ordnance, the bombs, missiles, and ammunition that give the air wing its striking power. They also staff the crash and salvage crews who respond if an aircraft catches fire or goes overboard. High risk, high stakes. Purple shirts are fuelers. They pump JP-5 jet fuel during flight operations, working around a substance that can ignite with a single spark on a deck surrounded by running engines and live weapons. There's no room for error. Brown shirts are plane captains, the sailors assigned to specific aircraft. They know every inch of their jet and inspect it before every flight. The pilot trusts them with the machine. And white shirts are the safety observers, medical personnel, and quality assurance inspectors. They watch everything, and they have the authority to stop operations if something isn't right. The whole system is a hierarchy built on experience and trust, and the color you wear tells everyone exactly where you stand in that hierarchy. First, real leadership. By year 3 or 4, the paths have started to diverge more clearly, and both enlisted sailors and officers are facing their first real tests of leadership. An enlisted sailor who makes E4 Petty Officer 3rd Class is earning around $45,000 a year. E5 Petty Officer 2nd Class brings that up to roughly $55,000 to $60,000 with allowances. The pay increase is nice, but the real change is what you're responsible for. An E5 might become a work center supervisor, directly in charge of 5 to 10 junior sailors. That means assigning tasks, checking work, writing evaluations that affect people's careers, and being accountable when someone under you makes a mistake. This is the first point in an enlisted career where the Navy is explicitly trusting you with people, not just equipment. The workload reflects that responsibility. During flight operations or deployment, 12-hour shifts are standard. Some rates work even longer. Reactor technicians in the engineering plant, for example, are always on watch when the ship is underway. The pace is demanding, and supervisors are expected to manage both the work and the welfare of their sailors. On the officer track, an 03 lieutenant is making around $70,000 base, which comes out to roughly $90,000 to $100,000 total. They've moved up from running a small division to potentially serving as a department division officer, responsible for 30 to 50 sailors and a significant piece of the ship's operations. At this level, the officer's job becomes less about learning and more about managing. They're coordinating with the senior enlisted leaders who run day-to-day operations, handling administrative requirements, and starting to see how their division fits into the larger picture of the ship's mission. The good ones have figured out that their role is to enable the people who do the work, not to micromanage them. Both tracks are also discovering something around this point. Not everyone keeps climbing. The ladder gets steeper, the competition gets tougher, and the Navy has a system designed to force that reality. The crossroads. The Navy doesn't want people to stay at the same rank forever, so they've built a system that forces you to either move up or move out. For enlisted sailors, it's called high year tenure. Every rank has a clock. An E4 has 10 years to make E5. An E5 has 16 years to make E6. An E6 has 22 years to make E7. If you hit those limits without promoting, the Navy thanks you for your service and shows you the door. For officers, the filter works differently, but cuts just as deep. Promotion boards review every officer's record at each career milestone. An 04 lieutenant commander who gets passed over twice for 05 commander is typically forced to retire. But here's what makes a Navy career sustainable despite those pressures: the rotation between sea and shore duty. Nobody serves 25 years continuously at sea. A typical pattern is 3 to 4 years of sea duty, which includes deployments lasting 6 to 9 months, followed by 2 to 3 years of shore duty at a training command, a staff position, or a school. During shore duty, you're home every night. You're present for birthdays and holidays. Your family gets stability. During sea duty deployments, you might not see them for the better part of a year, communicating through emails and occasional phone calls when the ship allows it. The rotation isn't perfect. The separations are hard. But it's how the Navy retains people over a full career. Senior leadership. If an enlisted sailor makes E7 Chief Petty Officer, everything about their career changes. Chiefs occupy a unique position in the Navy. They have their own mess hall, their own berthing area, their own culture and traditions. The uniform changes from the working clothes of junior sailors to khakis, visually marking the transition. It's not just a promotion, it's entry into a different community. A chief makes around $80,000 to $90,000 a year. An E8 senior chief earns more, and an E9 master chief can reach $100,000 or beyond depending on years of service and location. But what makes chiefs valuable isn't the pay, it's the experience. chiefs have been doing their jobs for 15, 20, even 25 years. They know every regulation, every shortcut, every way a piece of equipment can fail, and how to fix it. When something goes wrong at 3 in the morning, the chiefs are the ones who know what to do. Junior officers are told explicitly from their first day, listen to your chiefs. A 23-year-old ensign might technically outrank a chief with 2 decades of experience, but outrank doesn't mean know more. The working relationship between officers and chiefs is one of the foundations of how the Navy actually functions. The officers provide direction and handle the leadership structure, while the chiefs provide expertise and make sure things actually get done correctly. On the officer side, an O5 commander serves as a department head, in charge of an entire department, like engineering, air, operations, or supply. That's hundreds of sailors and tens of millions of dollars in equipment and systems. Commanders earn around $120,000 to $140,000 a year. They report directly to the captain, run their own domain on the ship, and carry significant responsibility. If the engineering department fails, the ship doesn't move. If the air department fails, planes don't fly. Some of them are looking at the next step, executive officer, the second in command of the entire ship. And beyond that, possibly the top job itself. Each department head owns a critical piece of the carrier's capability. Some of them are looking at the next step, executive officer, the second in command of the entire ship. And beyond that, possibly the top job itself. Here's where both ladders reach their peaks, and where the difference between them becomes clearest. An aircraft carrier typically has multiple people holding the rank of 06, which is called captain in the Navy. The commanding officer is an 06. So is the executive officer, the second in command. So is the command of the air group, known as the CAG, who leads all the aircraft squadrons. The deputy CAG, the reactor officer who runs the nuclear plant, all 06s. They all earn roughly the same, $170,000 to $200,000 a year, depending on time in service and allowances. They've all been in the Navy for at least 22 years. They all hold the same rank. And to even be eligible for that job, you have to have flown. Federal law, specifically Title 10 of the U.S. Code, requires that the commanding officer of an aircraft carrier be a naval aviator or naval flight officer, someone who has personally launched off carrier decks and landed back on them. The captain didn't learn to fly while working their way up to command. They learned 20 years earlier. The path typically goes something like this: flight school in their early 20s, then years as a squadron pilot flying missions and building experience, then department head in a squadron, then squadron executive officer, then commanding their own squadron of pilots, then air wing staff assignments, then executive officer of a carrier, the number 2 job, and finally, if they've made every cut and been selected over their peers, commanding officer. By the time they sit in that chair, they've been flying and leading aviators for 2 decades. The law requires aviation experience because the captain has to understand what they're asking their pilots to do. When a jet is trying to land on a pitching deck at night in bad weather, the captain makes calls that could cost lives. The Navy decided that kind of judgment requires first-hand experience, not just theoretical knowledge. On the enlisted side, the peak is Command Master Chief, the senior enlisted leader on the ship and the direct advisor to the commanding officer. The Command Master Chief has typically served 25 years or more. They've seen everything. They know the ship, they know the crew, and they often know things that junior sailors would never tell an officer directly. The Command Master Chief earns roughly the same as senior officers, around $100,000 to $120,000 a year. But their role is different. They advise, they don't command. An enlisted sailor can join at 18 with a high school diploma and, over 25 years, rise to become the Command Master Chief, the most experienced and respected enlisted leader among a crew of 5,000. An officer can start at 22 in a cockpit, spend decades flying and commanding aviators, and eventually take responsibility for the entire ship. $13 billion in hardware, 75 aircraft, and the authority to project American power anywhere on Earth. The captain earns around $200,000 a year. For that, they carry the personal responsibility for everything that happens on a floating city that operates around the clock, thousands of miles from home, for months at a time. Both paths start at the bottom. Both take about 25 years to reach the top. Both require making every cut along the way in a system designed to push out anyone who stops climbing. That's the pay scale on an aircraft carrier, from Seaman Recruit learning the ropes to a captain who can launch aircraft into combat with a single order. If you want to see how 5,000 people on that ship actually live day to day, how they eat, sleep, and work in the middle of the ocean, watch How 5,000 People Live on a $13 billion Aircraft Carrier next.